Hello, thank you for joining us today. I am Babs Moore and I'm the Sales Director of Amina Technologies. We design and manufacture invisible loudspeakers in Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire. One of our great challenges is overcoming misconceptions that choosing invisible speakers must mean that compromises are needed on sound quality or costs. Sadly, we hear this all too often and really appreciate comments from installers, often after their first project, telling us how amazed they are at the performance achieved. Whilst in a webinar like this, we cannot provide the experience of a full demonstration, we will show how your client can have invisible speakers throughout the home with zero visual intrusion, that is, no ceiling acne, which detracts so much from the finish of a room, and all at an affordable price for many. If you or your client still have doubts, please do arrange a real-life demonstration, as I know that such a positive experience is more effective than any words can be. Today, in this brief webinar, we'll look at what makes speakers using DML, that is distributed mode loudspeaker technology, different, beyond the obvious and most remembered benefit that they can be invisible in application. Often we see people doing a direct speaker-to-speaker comparison on cost, and also just replacing standard ceiling speakers with invisible ones. This frequently leads to far too many speakers being specified where they're not needed, and thus assumed cost is much higher than it needs to be. Amina EI is happy to provide advice on speaker specification and placements, and can offer solutions at different price points depending on your client's priorities. We will look at some specific costed projects, and then with our distributor Redline from Wickford, Essex, show some examples, which you are welcome to go and listen to for yourselves for complete surround sound and Dolby Atmos 3D solutions using invisible speakers. DML, as I mentioned, stands for distributed mode loudspeakers, which mean rather than being a point source like the centre of a traditional cone loudspeaker, the whole of the front panel of the speakers create a spread source of sound. This is best understood by thinking how an acoustic musical instrument, such as a violin or acoustic guitar, works. It's not the strings that make the sound. An electric guitar needs power to make music. The strings are vibrated by the act of playing the instrument, and the strings pass vibration through the bridge to the wooden top of the instrument. This in turn creates vibration in the air molecules, which, when they reach our eardrums, our minds experience as sound or music. Replacing the violin with a conventional speaker, playing the same music would sound completely different in the space, as we instinctively know, if it's not something that we've thought about before. The directionality of a conventional speaker would mean that only listeners directly on axis to the speaker cone will hear the sound as intended, and every other position in the room would be increasingly compromised as listeners move further off axis. So let us look at this in more detail. Here we have an example of a kitchen breakfast room area. In the top picture, we're showing two conventional ceiling speakers and indicating the spread of frequencies by the different shades of red. So the narrower spread is indicative of higher frequencies, broadening out as a frequency decreases. The greatest volume is heard directly under the speaker. In the lower picture, we have two DML speakers in the same positions, and this time the whole space, not just the area immediately under the speakers, is filled with even sound, and there is no loss of detail or clarity in the mid to high frequencies, regardless of where someone is within the room, just like a violin would fill that same space. This is a very different way of thinking about how speakers fill a room with sound. for an even sound right across the room and the frequency range, then an increased number of conventional speakers would be required versus the number of DML speakers. So realistically, let's look at a much bigger space, and the advantages of this become more apparent. Here we have a private swimming pool, where typically 6 conventional speakers may be used. And for the purpose of illustration, we've only shown the spread of the higher frequencies. Bass would spread much further, but detail and clarity would be lost off axis if only a small number of speakers were used. The same space would be comfortably filled with sound right across the audible spectrum with just 2 DML speakers. In this short webinar, we're not going to go into the detailed maths behind this, but it's worth remembering as a guide that typically 2 to 4 times fewer speakers can be used whilst maintaining an even volume of sound in the room. There are other advantages that are often overlooked. The speakers are lightweight and float on the plasterboard, effectively replacing part of the plasterboard, and are not fixed to the joist, thus making a one-person ceiling install perfectly possible. The speakers are slim and require minimum depth behind the plasterboard, less than 35mm if there is no room for back boxes, and 73mm if a back box is being used, so fits comfortably in a standard 3 or 4-inch stud. So this makes for a very easy install. It's worth noting that the speakers fit between standard 400mm joist spacing, and we will look briefly at how speakers are installed later in the webinar. The speakers work well in acoustically harsh spaces, so popular with modern designs. And this is just like a musical instrument. And because of how the sound is made, any reflections will be additive to the original source. And there are not the same issues with reflections creating hot and cold spots. Now, before we look at some costed examples, I will briefly touch on the main products. Amina have 2 main product families. The Mobius product, built up upon over 20 years of experience with invisible speakers, are designed to sound their best when covered with a 1.5 to 2mm standard skim of plaster or similar. The Edge products were originally designed for dry line, i.e. no plaster skim applications, and have a slightly beveled edge. Because they're not covered by that weight of plaster, the Edge speakers are slightly louder for the same input power, plus have a little bit more bass presence. So they have also become popular in full plastered solutions as a retrofit option. Mobius speakers, which have a completely flat front panel, can also be covered by a wide range of other materials such as wood veneer, leather, and many more. Both the Edge and Mobius family have 3 main family members, and the cost is irrelevant of whether an Edge 3 or Mobius 3i speaker is chosen. The price is determined by the power handling and the performance of the speakers, not by which family they belong to, allowing the choice between Edge and Mobius to be made depending on which is most appropriate for the application, and not on price. Most installed speakers require support products. DML speakers are no different. These include back boxes for different build requirements, fire hoods where required for a 60-minute fire rating based on current EU law, and bass units where more lower frequency presence is required, typically in main listening and surround sound areas. A key product is the protection unit, which, as the name suggests, protects the speaker against accidental overdriving. I will now show a short animation which simply and effectively sums up what makes DML speakers different, and is an excellent tool to use when explaining to potential customers as to why they should consider invisible spread source DML speakers. If you wish to use this item with your customers, then it's available from the animation section of our website. So, as mentioned earlier, often too many speakers are specified, and thus it can appear that invisible is too expensive of option when in reality it may not be. And because a room can be redecorated many times during the lifetime of the speaker, they do not go out of fashion, and I would always encourage people to look at the lifetime cost in addition to just thinking about the short-term costs. The speakers, professionally installed, have a 10-year limited manufacturer's warranty against manufacturing defect. So now we'll look in more detail at a couple of practical examples. Here we have a modern open-plan kitchen breakfast room where the client wants even ambient music throughout this acoustically harsh space. It's also worth remembering that invisible speakers, besides not impacting the visual look of the room, are protected from the inevitable impact of cooking in a kitchen and have no grill to look dirty or faded over time. The height of the ceiling has a big part to play in how many speakers are required for even SPL sound pressure level in an area, regardless of which speaker type we are looking at. In these examples, we're wanting no more than 3 dB of variance in volume, even at higher frequencies, such as 2.5 to 5 kHz, so critical for clarity. Hence the quantity of conventional in-ceiling speakers, shown in orange dots in the example of the 2.5 metre high ceiling in the left-hand diagram above. 4 DML speakers will provide the even coverage required. So using Mobius 3i, we're looking at a recommended retail cost, ex VAT, of under £3,000, or for the more powerful Mobius 5i, just under £4,000. This offers a competitive option versus good quality in-ceiling speakers with the benefit of zero visual intrusion. However, for a slightly higher ceiling, this time we're looking at a 3 metre high, then the numbers of speakers required of both types, whilst retaining less than 3 dB variation in volume, is reduced. And with 2 Amina speakers, the recommended retail price of the speakers and support products, ex VAT, is now £1,400 for Mobius 3i and £1,900 for the more powerful and improved sound quality from a Mobius 5i. In either case, for better bass presence, regardless of speaker choice, especially if the area is likely to be used for louder music, it's worth considering the addition of an ALF40 bass enhancer for a recommended retail price of £330, which could be fitted under the kitchen units, for example. Additionally, it's worth mentioning at this point there is the added benefit and cost savings of less speakers to install, so less labour, less wires, less channels of amplification, all of which reduce the comparative costs versus standard in-ceiling speakers. So I'd always encourage people to look at the total system cost and not just at the speaker costs. To take this to a more extreme example, but in reality one speaker would give even sound pressure levels to within typically -6 dB across a room this size. So for someone who, like me, who predominantly listens to the radio, podcasts or audiobooks and appreciates a smooth, clean ceiling, but where budget is tight, then it would be perfectly realistic to offer just one speaker as an option. It goes without saying there would of course be no stereo separation. And if a stereo source is being used, it should be monoed at the amplifier. So if you went for a Mobius 5i here, it's not only a more powerful speaker, but enhances the listening experience with more linear performance and significantly increased bass presence. The Mobius 3i solution retail price is just over £700 and the Mobius 5i just under £1,000. In the time available, I'm now going to move from a single room to looking at a whole house solution in one step. This home has ceilings 2.8 metres high downstairs and 2.5 metres high upstairs, so all fairly standard. The living room includes a full 5.1 surround sound system using an ALF 80 sub. There are Mobius 7i's at the front and 5i's for surrounds. And both the fronts and the surround speakers could be positioned in the wall or ceiling, depending on construction and preference. Ambient music is provided in the hall and dining room with Mobius 3i, and the more powerful Mobius 5i's have been selected for the typically noisier kitchen breakfast room. And as mentioned before, these give an enhanced listening experience more appropriate for entertaining. Upstairs, the Mobius 5i's are reserved for the master bedroom. It's not unusual to see TV sound enhancement or even surround sound used in the main bedroom. And if you went for surround sound, again the speakers could be in the wall or ceiling. The remainder of the upstairs utilises Mobius 3i's. There is not one size fits all, and the actual selection process of speakers will depend on many factors, including room size and height, the volume required, the budget, how many channels are preferred. But in reality, one speaker would certainly give good sounding, even volume, room filling sound in a moderate sized bedroom. This option for speakers together with the back boxes and protection units would give music in every room of this home, leaving the appearance unaltered, and a real wow factor. And many do not like having ceiling speakers visible throughout the house, even if music is desired everywhere. And this can all be done for a recommended retail price of just under £18,000. So to try and summarise, the choice of speaker, even within identical homes, would vary depending on clients' requirements and budget. Amina DML speakers are not seen in application, but they fill a room with sound very effectively, are lightweight and easy to install, and because of their dispersive characteristics, leave more flexibility as to their exact positioning without impacting the overall performance. In this simple chart, we have shown in broad terms the suitability of different speakers depending on application. And Amina are always happy to give advice on options that will be suitable for a particular application. Any of the speakers can provide ambient music. For louder music, we'd recommend adding some bass enhancement if a Mobius or Edge 3i is being used. As volume increases, and particularly for party dance music, which has a high bass component, then a sub would enhance the experience. One exception may be the Edge 7i, which has sufficient bass without adding a subwoofer, except perhaps for where the bass needs to be felt as well as heard. It is a matter of personal taste. For surround sound, such as 5.1 systems or Dolby 7.4.2 system, then as with conventional speakers, a powerful subwoofer is required to really enjoy action films to the full. Let us now look at some complete system solutions, which you are welcome to visit and listen to for yourselves. Over to Martin Moorcroft at Redline.
Redline started distributing Amina in 2008, and in the last 12 years we've learned an awful lot about design, specification and installation. We have 3 demo facilities at Redline. Our main media room downstairs displays Amina Immersive at its best. It's 7.2.4 using Edge 7, Edge 5 and Velodyne in-wall subs. The reaction we've had from everybody who's come to listen to that system has been excellent. I think people are very, very surprised at just how good a value for money, a high performance system that really is. And every single end user that's been through there has absolutely loved it. Our newly finished small demonstration room was conceived to show the difference between Amina in-wall and in-ceiling speakers. These systems are driven identically by the same AV amp and the same source, and you can actually swap between the systems on the fly. The speakers we're using in that room are Edge 3 in the wall and Edge 3 in the ceiling, so the only difference between both systems will be their position in the room. The typical result of the sound quality in that room is very Amina. It's a big sound, easy to listen to and very impressive. We've been field testing our Amina white glove panel fitting service. It's been very successful and has been really well received by both dealers and integrators alike. Dealers and contractors who don't feel comfortable installing the panels would call us and we'll do that for them. If you don't want a full white glove service, we offer on-site training and install assistance as part of our program. Dealers considering installing a Amina immersive system should really come and see Redline and see what we have on offer.
Thank you, Martin. In case you missed the numbers in the video, the full Dolby Atmos media recommended retail price ex VAT for all the equipment and not just the Amina speakers is a fraction over £20,000. And many people who have visited this are stunned at the quality and compare the experience very favourably with much more expensive solutions. This is not a dedicated home cinema, but a media room with a large sweet spot, again due to the dispersive nature of the speakers, allowing all the family to enjoy films together, fully engaged in the immersive cinema-style sound, but in a multi-use room. The smaller room, with 5.1 system, both in the walls and the ceiling, has a recommended retail price, ex VAT, of under £4,500, again for all the equipment, not just the Amina speakers. This makes it perfect for master bedrooms, snugs, or perhaps a children's playroom or games room. To these prices, installation costs would be added, but that's where our AV installation partners take over. So far in this webinar, we've been looking how to specify affordable invisible speaker solutions for your client. And the intention was not to cover how to install the speakers. However, I'm very aware that some people may be listening in who are not familiar with the speakers at all. So we felt it was important to briefly show the installation process. The installation is not complex or difficult, but it's important to do correctly for the optimum experience. What we will show is the most common type of installation, and it's equally applicable to a wall or a ceiling. The Mobius family can also be covered by many other materials such as wood, wood veneer, leather, and many more, creating fantastic freedom for interior design. Much more in-depth information on installation is available from our website, But this animation, which I'm about to show, just gives a brief overview of the process. So here, first of all, you create an inspection hole so you can see where the joists are, because the speakers float between the joists. You cut a hole out just slightly larger than the speaker using the template provided. Feed the cable through, put the back box in and screw into place. You then have a permanent crimp connection. The speaker will automatically level with 12.5mm plasterboard, and a hard joint filler is used around the edge. This is then allowed to dry before applying joint tape right across the front of the speaker. A full 1.5 to 2mm skim of plaster can be applied, allowed to dry, and then painted, wallpapered, or decorated as normal. Of course, in a short webinar, by necessity, this can only be an introduction. Hopefully, however, this has given you the confidence to talk to potential clients about using invisible speakers in their properties, and to reassure them that such a solution not only has a great wow factor, but is certainly not prohibitively expensive. And I'll reiterate what I said earlier. For yourselves or for your clients, a demo is the best way to see what is possible. Of course, we'd be delighted to help further on any projects you may have in mind. So please see the contact details on this slide. And thank you for joining us, and the Amina team look forward to hearing from you. Goodbye.